cry aloud, spare not. Lift up thy voice like a trumpet.
Bro, I'm just fucking sick of people. I'm just sick of people. I'm just sick of motherfuckers. I'm just sick. I'm tired. I'm so fucking tired. I'm just so fucking tired. I'm tired as fuck. I'm so fucking exhausted. I'm just so fucking tired. I just can't. I just fucking can't. I'm over it. I'm so fucking tired of people. I'm just so fucking tired of people. I'm 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 so fucking tired.
All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. First thing and foremost, I want to give all praises, all honor, and all glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakak Radash. Secondly, I want to give double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone who taught me this truth in righteousness and in sincerity. And third of all, I want to give salutations to the hopeful elect that's out on the highways and the byways teaching and preaching this word in truth and in sincerity. The title of this lesson is going to be, Why is Jake Tired? Once again, why is Jake tired? And as you've seen in the video clip at the beginning of this lesson, you had, Israelite, because Jake is short for Jacob, our forefather who had the 12 tribes of Israel. He had 12 sons from Judah being the so-called African Americans, all the way down to Issachar being the so-called Mexicans. And through them came the nation of Israel. So Jake is short for Jacob, and Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and that is our nation. So why is Jake tired? And you seen in that video clip, pretty much he was just spazzing. He was completely fed up with everything that's going on in this place, mainly the people. As you heard him continuously saying, I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm tired. I'm tired of these people. I'm tired. I'm just tired, And he could very well be on the other side, tasting the rainbow by the way he sounded. But, the moral of that video is Jake is tired. But we were not brought here to rest. You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans that are dwelling in America, we were brought here for punishment. Not to rest here, not to prosper here, not to, be destined to just fulfill our entire existence here. Because the nation of Israel, we are supposed to prosper and, be perfect as a nation. But that is not why we are here in America, which is spiritually Babylon the Great. We were brought here as a punishment. That's why our enemy, the sword of the Lord, is the ruler of this country. The so-called white man Esau Edom, our eternal opposition, our everlasting opposer, So we were brought here for punishment. So this is the book of Micah chapter 2 and verse 10, and it reads, Arise ye and depart. Right, so rise up and separate yourself. That's what that's saying. Come back to your power, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, because that's the only way you can arise. Our people are in a low position because of the lack of knowledge. They don't have the knowledge of the names of their power, the Father through the Son. They don't know those names or care to know those names. So they are low. They are in a low, weak position. But when you are brought back to the knowledge of your power, you can call on the names, you can read the scriptures with the true understanding. You can teach these things and understand them. That's when you are risen. You are in a risen state. and you depart from this world. And we find our rest in the truth, in the scriptures, in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, in the grace that was given to us, the peace that was given to us by Yahweh Shai, who the world calls Jesus Christ, him shedding his blood for the elect and covering us with that peace and safety, the true peace and safety of our transgressions not being held against us. So it says, arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest. Right, America is not your rest. You were brought here to languish, to be afflicted, to be oppressed, to go through harsh trials and tribulations. That's ultimately why you were brought in America, not to find rest. So, our people are being afflicted and oppressed on a daily basis. That's why you see videos like that at the beginning of this lesson. Jake is screaming to the top of his lungs, I'm tired, because we are being oppressed. We are destitute as a nation. But those who are in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai and of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, those who have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, they are not in that, terrible position, in that we do get tired, but at the end of the day, we have the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of our power, to combat that. We have the peace that was given us by Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, through Yahweh Shai shedding his blood. So it says, it shall destroy you. Well, it says, because it is polluted, it shall destroy you. The food is polluted. The music is polluted. The television is polluted. The earth itself is polluted. Our vegetation, fruit trees are cut down. The herbs that grow naturally in the grass is called weeds, and we are told to cut it. We got landscapers continuously cutting the herbs, pesticides all over the food. The waters is polluted. And just overall, the doctrine, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of this world is polluted because it's deceitful, it's vain, and it's against Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, our power. So it shall destroy you, as it says. Because it is polluted, it shall destroy you, even with a sore destruction. And he is destroyed. That Israelite, at the beginning of this lesson in that video clip, he is in a very destroyed state. A very low and weak state, lost, and just ready to just explode, because he is drinking and he is completely, one with this kingdom. Even though it's destroying him and making him tired, he has nothing else to cling on to, because he does not know Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, which is knowing this truth. He's not calling on the names, because if he was, he would not be making videos like that. He would not be operating within that spirit, because the Lord gives you peace, safety in this truth. But we were ultimately cursed, and we were brought here to serve out our curses. Now, when you jump to Deuteronomy 28 and 64, from 64 to 65, this is one of the curses that the Lord put on his people, the children of Israel. So when we were sent to America, which is spiritually Babylon the Great, we were not sent here to rest. We were not sent here to prosper. We were not sent here to, have the kingdom of heaven. We were sent here to be in a hellish state, to be in hell. This is our hell, our lower position. Because, one of the meanings of hell is being in a lower state, you being in a low position, being destitute. Our people are completely dry of the spirit and power and the truth of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. They have none of the understanding of the Lord, not the true understanding. And we know that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. So because our people are not calling on the names, they're not truly repenting and forsaking this world and not trying to rest in this society, in this world, you know, they have become corrupted, just like this world is corrupted. 2/3 of the nation of Israel is who I'm speaking of. But it reads in Deuteronomy 28:64, and the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. Right, so all of these different idols. You know, you got the Mecca, you got Buddha, you know, these statues that they build. You know, people go and worship these things. You got these images that they create, Jesus Christ, you know, that people be worshiping the wooden cross. You know, you got all of these different idols that have been created here in America. And this is what this is speaking about. To grab a little context too, I'm gonna go up to 45. This is why these curses was put on us as a nation. It reads in Deuteronomy 28:45, moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee. Right, so they're going to come upon you, and when you try to run, you try to flee from them, they're going to pursue you. So they're going to chase behind you. And it says, and overtake thee. So they're going to catch up. You're not going to be able to escape them. You know, no matter, you got these celebrities that, you know, sell out, take the bag just so that they can get out of the ghetto, they can get out of that low position. But time and time again, Esau Edom shows them that they are still Negroes in his eyes. They are still slaves and, you know, niggas and wild animals in his eyes. By taking certain things from them, throwing dirt on their name, you know, doing all manners of wickedness when it comes to our people that try to sell out in order to escape these curses. They get overtaken in the end all be all, because they are not seeking Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai for deliverance. They're seeking money. They're seeking, you know, the power of Esau, trying to get on his good side instead of trying to get on the Lord's good side, who controls Esau. You know, so it says, and shall overtake thee till thou be destroyed. Right, so till you are spazzing out like that Jake at the beginning of the lesson. You know, you tired of people. You just tired of living. You want to end yourself until you're spiritually dead and destroyed, because he is in a spiritually destroyed state. Because if he was spiritually alive, he would understand that all of these things have to happen, and it's only going to get worse. And it's better for the nation of Israel, you know, this society getting worse, because the worse it gets, the closer we get to our society, our kingdom, which is going to be beautiful, righteous, and perfect. So it says, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord Yahweh thy power. Right, so because you did not listen, you didn't follow the rules that was given to you, you know, that is why it says, and his statutes which he commanded thee. So it says the commandments and the statutes, you know, our whole book of the law. Now we can't keep it perfectly, but we rehearse the righteous acts to the best of our abilities, you know, according to our measure, according to our lot. You know, we rehearse the righteous acts, and to the best of our ability, we put on as the elect. And that's what we are required to do. It says in verse 46, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. Right, so going down the generations, these curses are going to pursue you, they're going to overtake you, and they're going to destroy you. The only ones that are being revived, you know, even though they were affected by the curses heavily at a point before they were woken up, is the elect. You know, the 144,000 right along with the 1/3. They have been brought back to life through the spirit of truth. And they are still being brought back to life. And it's going to continue until we receive salvation. But going back down to 65, it says, and this is the point, because this is a curse that was put on the nation of Israel for their disobedience. It says in verse 65, and among these nations, right, so among those nations that we were scattered to, you got the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans all over America, all throughout America, and all of these other, like you got Israel all in the land of South America, you know, the Virgin Islands, you know, Benjamin, which is the so-called Jamaicans, you know, you got Zebulon, which is the so-called Guatemalans, Panamanians. You got the so-called Brazilians or Ecuadorians or El Salvadorians. They are from the tribe of Asher, you know. So we are all throughout the four corners of the earth. We have been scattered, but the main place that we are scattered within is Babylon the Great. You know, it's a big mixed melting pot with all of the tribes within it. So it says, and among these nations thou shalt find no ease. Right, so you're not going to find any physical ease, mental ease, spiritual ease, because these people, the majority of our people, they don't have the ease that comes from Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. And at a point, we didn't. You know, us that have been called into this truth, at a point, we didn't have that ease that comes from knowing who the true creator is and what his plan is. That gives us ease because we understand that this had to happen, and it ultimately is happening to save us, especially if we be of that number. So it says, and among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. Right, so you're not going to get rest. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to do everything that you don't want to do. You know, you're going to have to just exist. And your existence is based upon your judgment that was given to you by Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, whether you exist here to just perish eventually, or you exist here to eventually be brought back to life in the truth and the power, the spirit of your power, Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, and be delivered through the election, you know, through the Lord choosing to elect you to be saved or choosing to elect you to be destroyed. You know, so it says, but the Lord Yahweh shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. Did we not just see that in that video clip at the beginning of this lesson? And you see it all throughout the world. When you in the car, just start looking at people when you at the light. Just look at the countenance on majority of these people that be next to you in the car. You know, they always got a little tense face on them, or they look tired, or they look stressed. They arguing on the phone. You know, they getting aggravated in the traffic. When you dealing with your coworkers or just random people out in public, people always got a, you know, they say the bitch face or stank face. You know, it's just, it's a standard of being in a stressed out, confused, you know, destitute of hope state in America. That's the standard. Even though people try to speak words of hope and, you know, freedom and liberty here, that's not the truth. The actions speak louder than the words. This place is done. And these people show it through their countenance, like that Jake at the beginning of this lesson. He had a trembling heart, you know, being in this world, hating the people within it, hating yourself ultimately, and not being able to do anything about it. That makes your heart tremble. And the heart means the mind, you know, so his mind was trembling. I'm tired, you know, I'm tired. It says, and failing of eyes, right? Because you don't see no hope. He wouldn't have been doing all of that venting like that and just literally, how they say, crashing out, screaming at the camera, if he seen hope. We got hope. That's why we're not crashing out. Imagine if we received the truth of these scriptures, but we didn't have the hope of being saved. You know, we didn't have the knowledge of better things to come, we would also have failing of eyes, because we would know the truth, but we would see the wickedness in this world getting worse and worse, and it would just destroy us because we didn't have that hope and faith in the salvation. These 2/3 of Israel, the majority of our nation, they don't have that salvation within their hearts. You know, they're not meditating on the better things to come from the storm. So their eyes are failing because they're seeing how this place is deteriorating, how it's getting worse and worse. And it's ultimately destroying them. You know, it's destroying their heart. It's destroying their eyes. It's making them want to just close them forever. And that's why people are, you know, taking themselves out on a more and more rapid pace, especially with all of these new policies that DJ Trump, you know, has established and he's establishing. It says, and it's sorrow of mind. Right. I'm tired. I'm tired of people. I hate people. And then, like I was saying, he sound like he might be on the rainbow. So these Israelites out here that are not of the elect are all over the place. That's why we hope and pray that we are of that number, and our end is not, you know, similar to, that our end is not like theirs. Because the end of people like that is gonna be horrible, you know? Because yes, you're tired, but the message is out here. The truth is out. So the world makes you tired, but the truth gives you life. It gives you energy. These people, the majority of our people of the nation of Israel, they just don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to receive the truth. And ultimately, they were not given the eyes to see the truth, the ears to hear the truth, or the heart, which is the mind, to perceive the truth that is being told to them. So to them, it's just lies, or they literally don't even receive what's being said. It just fly right over their head. No. Proverbs. 29 and 2. Now, this is the book of Proverbs, chapter 29 and verse 2, and it reads, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Right, the righteous, when they rule, the people rejoice. Now, when you look at this society right here, are the people rejoicing? And I'm not talking about when you go out to the club and, you know, you 5-6 shots in and your favorite song gone and everything going right for you that night. I ain't talking about that, because that's not even true rejoicing. But, you know, people are trying to count the little small, you know, 5-second happy moments that you experience in your life as a form of us being able to rejoice in the society. That's not true rejoicing. True rejoicing is you being free from this system, from you being able to go outside and pick, you know, fruit that's untouched, undefiled, straight from the Heavenly Father off of your tree. You know, you having the land as your own. You having Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai to call upon and to literally be face to face with. Those are the things that will ultimately cause the nation of Israel to rejoice, and also all of the other nations that are not of the nation of Israel. Because from us rejoicing, we're literally gonna heal the entire earth. We're gonna, you know, expand in righteousness, and ultimately the other nations, they're going to get beaten into shivers. But eventually, all of the other nations outside of the nation of Edom, Esau Edom, which is the white man, they're eventually gonna, you know, get it right and begin to, you know, get their sovereignty, you know, and they're going to rejoice as well, because they're going to see the righteousness in the law of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, and that when they obey, they get benefits. But Esau Edom, his spirit is not upright within him, so he's never going to get it right. He's literally created to never be able to truly do right. You know, so he's going to have to perish after that 1,000 years. But it says, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. And that's showing you who the wicked is, because the people are mourning more and more right now. You got ICE coming out here, you know, in these different states, you know, without showing their face, just snatching people up. You got kidnappings on the rise without word coming out, especially when it comes to the so-called African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans. You hear very little news reports. You got shootings all day, every day. People locked up in jail mourning. Some people innocent. So the people are mourning. The food causing us to mourn. So the people are mourning right now. That video at the beginning of the lesson shows you the people are mourning. There's no unity. There's no understanding between each other. Nobody even care to understand each other anymore. They just rather understand their phone or their TV, their digital society, their digital life. That's what they care to understand. So the wicked is obviously bearing rule. And who is bearing rule? The so-called white man, which makes him the wicked, thus saith the scriptures. And when you look at his past, he has done nothing but wickedness. You know, unjust dealings, killings, raping, raping men as well, taking children and raping them, killing them, forcing them into slavery. Like, this man is wicked, and he has caused us to mourn through generation to generation. Just look back at the the time period where we was literally shackled in the cotton fields. Were we not mourning? Was the people not mourning? So the wicked is bearing rule. Now, this is the book of Proverbs, chapter 28 and verse 15, and it reads, as a roaring lion and a raging bear, so is the wicked ruler over the poor people. When it comes to the poor people, who are the poor people in America? You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. We are on the lowest of the low. We are on the lowest totem pole when it comes to the different races, so to speak, the different ethnicities that live in America. We are filling up the ghettos. We got all of the bullshit stores in our neighborhoods. We are the ones without the natural resources around our homes, not being able to, like I said, have fruit available to you that grows naturally, different things like that. And then when it comes to the educational system, the justice system, it's like a raging bear, just Esau Edom. Once he has us in the court, about to lay his judgment, so to speak, upon us, 9 times out of 10, he's looking at us like prey, and he puts himself in a predator position to take advantage of our weakness, which is the lack of knowledge. Our people are out here just wilding out like wild animals, and Esau Edom is taking advantage of it, and he's furthering the affliction. He's not teaching us the right path. He's actually influencing us through social media, how he portrays us in social media. You got the basketball wives and all of these different things like that, where you see a specific character portrayed in the black community, the Hispanic community, the Native American community, and it brainwashes our people when it comes to the music as well, when it comes to the food. He's literally putting all manners of poisons in our food. Is that not like a roaring lion trying to, come and devour you, or a raging bear coming to shred you apart? That's literally what he's doing, little by little, through, having our education, the lowest quality of education, not wanting us to be able to think for ourselves. Esau Edom has done these things. So this is obviously speaking of Esau Edom, This is obviously speaking of the wicked. Now, this is the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4 and verse 1, and it reads, "So I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun, many oppressions." Like I was just going through. We getting oppressed through the food we eat, through the water we drink, through the music we listen to, through the air we breathe. You got chemtrails getting sprayed, all of these nuclear facilities and different facilities that just pumping out gas. You got us getting defiled when it comes to just deforestation. The earth is being oppressed. Trash all in the water, trash all in the forest, and all in the grass. The earth is being oppressed. You got us being racially profiled, and Esau Edom can kind of overdo what he's supposed to be doing when it comes to the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, and he has a way higher chance of getting away with it or getting a tap on the wrist. But if you put an Israelite in his position and let him be in that Israelite's position, it's gonna be a completely different story. Life, death penalty, no less than 50 years. That's how Esau Edom rules. He oppresses the poor, and the poor right now is the nation of Israel, because we are without our power as a nation. The Lord has called a small few to come back and to ultimately save the rest of the nation, through them being delivered and them reproducing in the kingdom of heaven and eventually bringing back the whole nation. But as of right now, our people, the majority of them, are without the wisdom, knowledge, and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, which are the true riches, the Spirit of the Lord, the Holy Spirit. They are without these things. So that's our riches, spiritual riches. So without that, they are spiritually poor and physically poor, because we have been cursed. We have been cursed to be in a low position. So it says, "So I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of such as were oppressed." You got that Jake that was just literally screaming to the top of his lungs. He was crying either before or after that video. There's no way. Our people are destroyed, and he's not the only one. It's too many people that's saying that same thing that he's saying, and that's saying worse. You got a lot of people out here that's ready to put their hands on people, or ready to put the metal on them. That cold iron. You got a lot of people that's just done because they're being oppressed in all of these different ways. They have no rest. They have no peace. So it's getting worse and worse, because the love of many waxing cold, because iniquity is abounding. Esau Edom has not plucked it up, which he has the power to do. He has not established the laws of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai with the power that he has, but he has established his own self-willed laws of wickedness, because he's done these things, which brings oppression. Everybody is mad. Everybody is upset. Everybody is ready to just give up, whether that be taking themselves out, whether that be just becoming homeless and saying forget the system, whether that be taking a life because you feel like that's gonna bring you some satisfaction. Like, it's many different ways of people saying I'm done, it's over, that's the last straw. And you about to have a lot of last straws in these soon to come times, because we are in the early stages of Jacob's trouble. But it says, and behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. Right, the comforter is Yahweh Shai, and Yahweh Shai came in the volume of the book. So Yahweh Shai is ultimately these scriptures. They don't have the true knowledge of these scriptures, therefore they don't have the comforter, which is Yahweh Shai, aka the Holy Bible. They don't have the knowledge. They can't see what they read, the truth in what they read. They can't hear the truth in what they hear when they're reading or when they're hearing the scriptures being read, and they can't understand with their mind. They can't understand why Esau Edom was created to be the wicked, and ultimately the Lord can do what he wants. They can't understand that that's the case and that it is what it is. And it's ultimately the Lord's will for these Israelites to be stuck in these strongholds or these ways of thinking, so to speak. But it says, and on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter. Right, it says, and on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter. Right, so Esau Edom, that's why they be trusting in Esau's chariots, his military, his word, because the earth was given into his hand. He was given power over the earth, you know. But at the end of the day, he is not the comforter. He cannot bring them comfort, and he is the wicked. So all he brings them is discomfort. All he brings them is dis-ease, diseases, you know, in the mind, in the body, in the spirit, all kind of confusions. You know, you got people literally out here believing that they can be an animal. They can identify as that. These are not comforting things because they confuse you, and they ultimately lead you to being judged harshly, you know, negatively, getting a bad reward because of your bad behavior. Now, this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 24 and verse 5, and I'm going to try to be quick because that timer was my break, so I'm going to just try to speed it up. I got this and then one more scripture. This is Isaiah 24 and 5, and it reads, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Right, and like I went into the scripture in Deuteronomy, why we were cursed, and I read that one curse. We ultimately, you know, we transgressed. You know, we began to follow the ordinances of the other nations. We began to seek and envy the ways of the other nations that were not operating within the law, statutes, and commandments of our power. You know, so we broke the everlasting agreement with our power, which was, you know, one commandment specific: have no other gods before me. You know, so don't join yourselves unto the gods of these other nations that I have given them, because you are mine and I am your power. And that's how it's going to be in the kingdom of heaven, and that's how it's supposed to be. But because we went the opposite way, that's why we are where we are, and that's why the earth is defiled. You know, we began to defile the earth following the ways of these other nations, and the earth is ultimately being defiled on the highest level right now because of what we did. It was us, the nation of Israel. When we go off, when we, you know, stop trusting in our power, when we stop relying on our power, that's when we are brought low. That's when that covering, the power and the spirit of the Lord is taken from us, and he gives us over to whatever we were lusting after. You know, with that being the gods of these other nations, you know, specifically Jesus Christ, Buddha, Allah, all of these different idols. It says, therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Right. That Israelite at the beginning of this lesson was desolate. He's desolate of hope. He's desolate of faith. He's desolate of life, because he don't know Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. He just sees this place getting worse and worse, and the people getting worse and worse, and he's carnal with it. So it's like, you know, I hate these people. We hate these people more than you hate these people, because we know the truth. But the truth also brings us peace. That's why we are not crashing out. It brings us comfort, you know, because it is Yahweh Shai. So with Yahweh Shai comes comfort, comes peace. But it says, Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned and few men left. And that's the end all be all of America. Is going to be burned with fire, nuclear fire. You know, it's going to be so many nukes being dropped on America, you know, and that's how Babylon the Great, which is America, is going to be destroyed. And that is when the kingdom of heaven is ultimately going to be established, you know, after those nukes drop and the children of Israel comes down out of that chariot with Yahweh Shai, out of that fathership. And they are going to expand. They are going to enslave. They are going to break into shivers. And they are going to rule under Yahweh Shai perfectly with new bodies. Now, this is the book of Isaiah chapter 57 and verse 16. And I'm going to close it off on here. It reads, "For I will not contend forever, neither will I be always wroth. For the spirit shall fail before me, and the souls which I have made." Right. So if the Lord was always angry with us for our sins and what we did in the past to cause him to curse us and have us in this low state that we're in right now, if the Lord was mad like this forever, we would perish. You know, we would not be able to stand. We would fail. If the Lord was not bringing deliverance, you know, as this kingdom is getting worse and worse, we would perish. You know, it says, for the iniquity of his covetousness was I wroth. Right, him desiring other things that were not created for him. You know, desiring the things of the other nations, desiring their way of living, their customs, their gods, you know, their law, statutes, and commandments that were not given to us by our power. You know, because of that, it says for the iniquity of his covetousness, and iniquity is continuous sin. So the other nations caused us to live in continuous sin because they were not living according to the law, statutes, and commandments, and they are not living currently according to the law, statutes, and commandments of the Lord. So in times past and in this present day, our people are in continuous sin due to them desiring the ways of the other nations. And the main nation that has influence right now is Esau Edom here in America. That's why everybody wants to be American. Everybody wants to live the American dream. That's them coveting after the ways of the other nations. You know, I'm speaking to these Israelites specifically. You know, that's all of these celebrities trying to be big in the entertainment field or in the movie field or in the, you know, just trying to make it in the society, make a big name, leave your mark. You know, that's you coveting the image, you know, that Esau Edom painted for you to pretty much waste your life for. You know, they idolize these things and they become gods to them. They can't live without their money. They can't live without their establishment that Esau Edom granted them for them selling out. You know, and they ultimately sold out because they were coveting it. They desired it more than what they were given by Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai. They were not satisfied. It says, for the iniquity of his covetousness was I wroth, and smote him. Right, smote him with curses, smote him with wicked, evil judgments. I hid me and was wroth. Right, I hid me. So them people that be like, where was God during slavery? Why did he let this happen? Children getting abused, children getting fed to alligators. Why did the Lord let? Because the Lord hid his face from us because we turned our backs. So he allowed us to do what we wanted to do and to be punished for it. It says, and was wroth. So he was angry. You know, that's what that word means. You know, it says, and he went on forwardly in the way of his heart. Right. So the Lord let us just go on forwardly and do what we was desiring to do outside of his law, statutes, and commandments. And the judgments that we have received and we had received in the past was righteous and justified. And the Lord, you know, was completely and utterly justified in doing these things, and will be in doing the things that are about to be done. It says in verse 18, I have seen his ways and will heal him. I will lead him also and restore comforts unto him and to his mourners. Right, so the people of the nation of Israel that are of the elect, the members of the nation of Israel, the 144,000, right along with the 1/3 that's sighing and crying here, you know, and that's seeking their true power, that's practicing and rehearsing and desiring to serve, you know, their power and to abide in the law, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, and they're putting down and forsaking the ways of the other nations that caused them to be cursed. You know, those mourners are going to be comforted. They are being comforted right now through the scriptures, through Yahweh Shai. It says in verse 19, I create the fruit of the lips, peace, peace to him that is far off, and to him that is near, saith the Lord Yahweh, and I will heal him. Right, so the nation of Israel is going to be restored, you know, ultimately starting with the elect. It says in verse 20, but the wicked are like the troubled sea when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. And that's exactly what you just seen in that video clip at the beginning of this lesson. He was spewing out all of his filth, you know, because he's ultimately wicked. And he's being judged for his wickedness. The Lord is putting him through pure and utter hell. Got demons on him, got him screaming at the camera, and just, he sound, you know, like he probably got the rainbow demons on him too. It's just, they cannot rest. They're like a troubled sea. The waves tossing all over the place. You know, it, like it says, it's casting up mire and dirt. So, you know, they literally, our people are like a, you know, like the scripture says right here, a troubled sea. You know, a wind, when it's windy and you got the big old waves, our people just all over the place doing all manners of wickedness. And the wickedness that they're doing and creating is that mire and dirt that's cast up. So imagine you got a house on the beach and the waves just, you know, going all over the place around, you know, in front of your house that's looking out onto the seashore, and you got that mire and dirt getting splashed all over your house. That's like the wickedness of Esau, you know, of these 2/3 Israelites just building up. The more and more dirt that's splashing on that house is equivalent to the more and more wickedness that they are being laden with. The more devices, wicked devices and philosophies and ideas that they get while they're just all over the place in Babylon the Great. They listening to this preacher, but they also, you know, they got locked up, so they started becoming a Muslim, and, you know, you got Jake in the hood, you know, they got a whole hood culture. You know, our people are all over the place in all of these different places that they are in when it comes to their mindsets and just their allegiances. They have different forms of dirt, different forms of, you know, trash that they gather, that they collect. But it says, there is no peace, saith my power, to the wicked. So if that Israelite at the beginning of the lesson is not of the elect and he is of the wicked, he ultimately will not have peace until he is put to rest, you know, either by starvation, the sword, or ultimately the nukes dropping and reborn in the kingdom. That's when he's going to have rest, because he's going to be reborn righteous, not wicked. But right now, the majority of our nation have been born wicked. And as the scriptures say right here, there is no peace, saith my power, to the wicked. So they won't receive peace. It's going to get worse and worse. The SNAP benefits is only the start. That being cut off, ICE coming out, you know, ransacking your homes, that's only the start for the wicked. It's going to get worse. But until next time, I hope you brothers and sisters was edified. Shalom.